Okay, so a very, very, very warm welcome to everyone who's here today live. This is the first of what is programmed for 12 teachings on the Mahamudra prayer. Let's see how we get along. And there's so much in it. I might be saying the same thing this time next year. But anyway, the idea is, the outset is 12 teachings. Now, for those of you who are regulars for our Saturday morning, we'll be starting, as always, with the good motivation of the Bodhisattva, but we won't be using the prayers that we've been using most of the time. So the protocol that was set up in Samaling, that I'm following because it came from Akon Rinpoche, is that when the teachings are the general Buddhist teachings, then we do refuge and bodhicitta and the sort of usual prayers we do. When it's specifically about meditation or about Mahamudra and the Kagyu lineage, then we do the short prayer to Vajradhara, which is what we'll be doing at the beginning today. If you don't have the text to hand, I did send it out along with the support document, then you can just sit quietly with good motivation and join in, because on Zoom we can't all chant together anyway. It's a mess with the time delay. It doesn't work. So there'll just be me on the recording anyway. And then also a very warm welcome to everyone who is watching this on YouTube. So good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. If you're somebody important, because that happens sometimes, I've had Rinpoches who once or twice wanted to check me out, so they watch in. Or if you're an old-timer Buddhist and you've been around a long time, then I need to explain something about beginning prayers and beginning motivation. And so those of you who've been coming a lot, you know we don't do much in the way of actual prayers. Tibetans do a lot, and they have a very, very great respect for the actual teaching. So today, when it comes, it will be a Mahamudra prayer. But they've got so much respect for it that the feeling is you have to start really right, with all the respect for the lineage, for the teacher, for the teachings, and with a mind that's in a state of refuge and bodhicitta, and then offering a mandala to the teaching and doing a 7-branch prayer, because that's good anyway, anytime, and so on and so on. And the same at the end, lots of dedication prayers. Most of the people coming to my Saturday morning teachings don't understand the Tibetan, and it doesn't have so much meaning as it would have for a Tibetan person, of course. You can have a rough idea what it's about, but I prefer usually to talk through the motivation at the beginning of each session, so we all know where our hearts and minds should be, and then to minimize the prayers chanted in Tibetan. And so it's not because this is why I want to say it. So if you're Rinpoche, whoever you are watching, it's not because I disrespect the prayers. I've spent a lifetime doing them, and it's just, I think many of you think too, you've seen over the years, that the understanding of how we enter into a teaching is the most important thing. The prayers just express that. So anyway, let's start this course, and today with wonderful motivation. As I'm sure you know, we need 3 vital components to our motivation. First, we need a big mind. As we'll discover through the Mahamudra prayer, no one, not even the Buddha, has ever encountered mind, no one. So if nobody ever encountered it, a big one or a small one doesn't make much sense philosophically. And if you've got a good deal of meditation experience, from a meditation point of view, how can you make something nobody ever found bigger or smaller? But here we're on a very, very practical, understandable level of relative truth. And we define a big mind by the number of people in it. If we're attending these teachings for our own benefit, our own Dharma benefit, then that's one person's benefit. It's wonderful. But then if we include, as we should do in the Bodhisattva way, and especially in the Vajrayana way, those who are very close to us through the power of karma, our parents, such a profound link with them. Even this thing we're in, this body, contains their genetics, contains a psychological inheritance passed on in the womb, and so on and so on. Whether they were good parents or not, this human vehicle is an amazing thing if you know what to do with it. It's a bit of a catastrophe if you don't know what to do with it, but it's an amazing thing if you do. We owe it to them. They gave us this human possibility. So our parents, our siblings, children, if you have children, those who've been very present in our life, whether they helped us or messed us up doesn't matter. They're our karma. We have to carry that karma to liberation, psychologically. And then we have a profound, karmic, very real link with those people, or dogs, or cats, or budgerigars, or whatever it was in your life. We'll meet them again and again in future lives. So our side of the interaction needs to be excellent. So a big mind is inclusive. And of course, once we've included the important karma people, then it's the other people present in our life, the other sentient beings, and eventually all sentient beings, which is a nice idea, but you can't really think it or imagine it. So the bigger the mind, the better. And then if you can make it even bigger than bigger, 1 dimension, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, then you don't only consider the beings you're connected with as here with you, and you are learning to help them because they can't help themselves. They don't have the karma. You do. But we see them not as mum and dad just in this life. The next dimension is to understand the immensity of karma where we come together over past lives. Maybe you were your mum's mum in the past life, whatever. And in the future lives, who they'll be, what they'll become. So anyway, first we need a big mind. And the big mind is we are taking these teachings for everyone, everyone. Even the very worst, most violent, most abominable of human beings, for them too, we are including them. Then second, we need a loving mind. And as time goes by, and as practice goes by, then we want to make our own attitude towards each and every one of these beings we include the best possible. If you've ever loved and cherished somebody so much, and your whole heart wants to make their life better, that's a beginning. So however much we've cared for somebody or some being, that much is our starting point for wanting to have perfect, great, unconditional love for each and every being. So a big mind and a loving mind. And then last of all, a happy mind. A happy mind because all of those things we've been thinking of in 1 and 2 are impermanent. They come, they go. This body, this life, our connections, our experience, all goes. Dharma is forever. And what we are doing here is setting deep in our hearts, deep in our stream of consciousness, pure Dharma, true Dharma. And that will be our friend when we die. That will be our friend between lives in the Bado. And that will be our very best friend in the next life. So I hope as we do the prayers, then you can have those things in mind and want to listen with all of your heart and undistractedly. Thank you. Sonje chodam soji chonam la jancho bado dane chapsunche. Dagi jinso jipe sanam ji rola penchera sonje droparasho. Semchen tamche dewa tang dewe jodang den parajoche. Tungal dang tungal chi jodang tralwara joche. Tungal me pen dewa tang pa tang men tralwara joche. Yerin chadang netang tralwe tang yom chenpo la ne parajoche. Doje changchen telo narodang mapa mela choche kampupa. Dusum shecha kunchen kamapa cheshi chungje jupa zinamdam. Trita sasum palen rupaso sablam chacha chela nanepe. Yame jogon dapo kachula solwan depso kachula manam. Jupa zino namtara jinjelo. Shenlo gomji kampara sumpa shen seno kunla chakshen me padam. Sede data chope gomchen la Yekura shenpa me parachinjelo. Mogu gomchi kora sumpa shen. Menga tego jepe lama la. Jundu sowan depe gomchen la. Chame mogu jewara jinjelo. Yangme gomchi ngashira sumpa shen. Gangsha tok sowa. Gangsha tope mogo soma. De. Macha dekara jope gomchen la. Gomcha lodan tralwara jinjelo. Namtong ho chokara sumpa shen, chiang mayen che yang chawala, manga ropa chawe gomchen la, kode yerme topare jinjen lo. Deyata shame shamawate shameta shatra amkore, mamkore marajite karota ke orita juwate oloyane, Bishudan male malapanaye kukure kaka grase grasa nao muki param muki a muki shamedawane sawagraha mandanane negri hitva savabhava pravadina vimukta marapasha savitva buddha mudra nugatita savamare butsarita parishude Bega Shantu Sava Marakamani. Palen Sawe Lama Rinpoche Dage Chewara Pende Tenshula Kadrin Chempo Gone Jezonte Kuson Tuche Ngadrup Sandu Sol. Thank you. So now we're on this course and we are studying a prayer. Second, I'm rescuing my papers because the fan is blowing them all over the place. Thank you. So when he was introducing teachings on this prayer, then the current Tai Situpa said, yes, of course, we're studying this particular prayer about Mahamudra from someone, the third of the Karmapas, the third Jawa Karmapa. But he said, in another way, it's much, much more than that, because he said this prayer contains all of Dharma. It contains all of the Hinayana Dharma, all of the Travakayana Dharma, if you call it that, all of the Mahayana Bodhisattva teachings, and of course the very quintessence of Vajrayana, which is the Mahamudra practice. And so, but then beyond that, we're not really studying a prayer at all. We are studying ourselves. All of Mahamudra, all of the Buddha's teachings are so that we get to know ourselves. Often we say our own mind better. And when we come to understand mind, we understand mind is everything. And so we want to understand everything. It's a big agenda, but we are not, the point I want to make is that we are not scholars studying a prayer out there because we want to put in even more intellectual information that we'll never use and that will probably never be of any benefit for us. We want to use this prayer to understand how the Kagyu Lamas of our tradition have, over the centuries, used the Buddha's teaching to help us discover who we really are and to help us understand what's going on. So my wish and my hope before I start these teachings, these talks, is that all of you, or at least a lot of you, or at least some of you, or maybe one of you, will really get something from these verses that open your eyes to the nature of reality around us. So that's the first point. I just have to make some adjustments here. So, why are we studying Mahamudra? Well, I think most of you have a connection with the Kagyu lineage. The Kagyu lineage, as we'll see in a moment, has brought into itself, over its various generations, many of the teachings that went from, Buddhist teachings that went from India to Tibet. Famously, there were 8 great transmissions that came from India to Tibet, starting with Guru Rinpoche in the 8th century, and then with Mapa and the other great translators, more in the 11th, 12th century. So 8 streams of teachings went to Tibet. As the centuries went by in Tibet, the Kagyu lineage very, very nicely kind of gathered into it. It started with just its own transmissions from mainly through Mapa, so it's called Mapa Kagyu. But then through Gampopa, we got the Bodhisattva teachings and the Kadampa teachings. And then as each generation went by, the Chut teachings, the Kala Chakra teachings, and so on. So it's like a river where various new streams come and join it and make it stronger and bring in the wealth of their own waters. Near Samiling in Scotland, next to Samiling, you've got the, I forget which one, the White Esk or the Black Esk, but one of the 2 Esks. And then as you go towards Langholm, the White Esk and the Black Esk, which get their name because when you look at the waters, they're different colors. They go over different land, they pick up different minerals, they join together and make the Esk. So many streams that came beautifully from India to Tibet have been incorporated in our Kagyu lineage. We have many practices that we do and that we can do and that a very wise, experienced, well-equipped Kagyu Lama could give you as your way of awakening your mind, stabilizing your mind, and so on. But at the heart of it all, is Mahamudra. So if we have a connection with the Kagyu lineage, then we need to know what Mahamudra is. Earlier this year, or perhaps last year, I ran a course on the two main currents that run into the Kagyu lineage. They're called the path of skillful means and the path of liberation. Path of skillful means, mainly the 6 yogas of Naropa, and the path of liberation may be mainly the mind teachings, the meditation teachings from Saraha. We looked at those lineages and how they come together. And to quote one of my teachers, Khenpo Sultim Jamso, to put them in relation to each other, he said, the 6 yogas are like a ladder that get you to the roof. Mahamudra is the roof. Once you're on the roof, you don't need the ladder because you're not going to go back down. And so we can get to the roof through the 6 yogas. We can also get to the roof through the mind teachings of Mahamudra. So this is a big topic. I won't go there today because I've got a lot to get on with. But for instance, in the modern world, I won't say the West, people have done 3-year retreats, 4-year retreats, where they've acquired the 6 yogas. Other people have done Tai Situpa's 6-year Mahamudra course, which is mainly the path of liberation, which is teachings on the mind, mainly shamatha, vipassana, and transmission of insight, transmission of pointing out. Having witnessed that over the decades, what my teachers tell me is generally the path of liberation, the Mahamudra mind instructions, are more attractive for Westerners. Because in their culture, there isn't all of the complexity of the various Vajrayana practices, sadhanas, that are the vehicles for acquiring the various skills like dream yoga and tummo and so on. So they're very attractive. But the advantage of the 6 yogas is that they accelerate the process. If everything's in place, teacher, the right disciple, the right motivation, the right connection, and so on, then it's a fast track, very powerful methods. But anyway, at the end of it all, whether one goes through the skillful means path, the 6 yogas, or through the Mahamudra mind training, it ends up with Mahamudra. What is mind? If you understand that, you understand everything. Milarepa said, understanding this one, what can we call it? Thing, which is Mahamudra. Let's call it a thing. Understanding this one thing, he just says one. He doesn't have a word with it. Chik, she, he says. Chik is one. She, when you understand it, you got it, you realize it. Kundrol, everything's liberated. And then along with that comes jashe, and then if you know that you can know 100 things, 100 practices, you can know so much, but you're still not liberated. So this is why we need to understand Mahamudra. We are connected to the Kagyu lineage. Its heart is Mahamudra. So therefore we need some idea, at least, and especially if you're setting out to practice intensely, you need to know where you're going. It's like you give up your job, you give up everything to go to India. You need to have a good reason for going to India. not just a whim. You need to be motivated by knowing why you're going there and all the goodies that you can find when you get there. So we need some idea of Mahamudra. So then, why this prayer? And then in particular, why this prayer seen through the commentary of the VIIIth Tai Situpa, who was called Chukijunne, also called Nimatenche, I think. He used both names. So when you look, you might see two different names for the VIIIth Tai Situpa. Tempa Ninche, maybe. Anyway, that was another one of his names. So why are we using these? Mahamudra came from India. It wasn't invented in Tibet. It was an import. There are Mahamudra texts from India. Where is it? Here is one very thin one. This one, very thin one, is one of the Indian Mahamudra texts. It's special for me because it was a present from Akon Rinpoche. And around the time he gave me that, he photocopied Tilopa prayer, instructions to Naropa, and he just cut out one verse with scissors. So he gave me this little strip of paper, and he said, that's your way. One verse to stick with me for the rest of my life. So there are Indian texts, and if you don't mind, before we get into the prayer itself, I'd like to say a few words, because it was absolutely fascinating watching our present 17th Karmapa teach in the Marmok teachings last summer. I think the idea was to give us an idea of the background of Vajrayana teachings. But once he started and once he did the research, he became fascinated with the whole history of Buddhism. And by the time we got to the end of a month of teachings, he hadn't even started about the origins of our Vajrayana teachings. And you could see his pleasure, also his frustration, once you do the research. And I think he got some, from what he was saying, he consulted some very knowledgeable people, the right people, to find out about the history of Buddhism in India, the early days, and what had happened all the way through, how many, 12 centuries of Buddhism in India before it went to Tibet. A lot happened. And he realized something, and I don't want to give myself a pat on the back, but I was very pleased because I've been fascinated by this for years. And I felt a bit like, keep it quiet, because so many of the Tibetan lamas who taught in Samiling, they taught it just as they heard it. They're what one of my great teachers, Khenpoken Nam, called old brains. This is how you heard it. You heard it from somebody wonderful. That's how you're going to teach other people. Don't even think about it, just pass it on. So, very, very traditional teachings about Tibetan Buddhism, where it came from, the 1,000-year-old, 700-year-old, depending on the lineage story. But when you do research, you get, how can you say, more to the truth of the matter, but you don't want to contradict the old brain masters who are so full of faith and who pass on something very, very special. So I thought to myself these last 20, 30 years, the more research I did, the more I got passionate about it. Well, keep that to yourself, Ken. You're going to upset somebody. So then to see the Karmapa take the lid off that to realize why these practices and where does Mahakala come from? Where does Vajravarahi come from? What's the whole history of Indian spiritual practice, not just Buddhist practice? And he was absolutely fascinated. And one thing, the only reason I'm really talking about that, beside the fact that it's interesting, is that the Indians thought very differently to the Tibetans, world apart. There are Mahamudra texts from India. Now they are very concise, and most of the time they don't have by the author a commentary to go with them to say, this is the poetry, okay, this is what I meant. Not there. Which means that they're, listen to this, you need to know. Some things are hard to understand. And then secondly, that means they're easy to misunderstand. I'll give you an example. These days on Facebook and on social media, you can see the 6 teachings of Naropa in various formulations. Don't get involved with the past, don't anticipate the future, and those 6, I think you've probably seen them. People use them. They use them as though this was a practice instruction given by Tilopa for beginners like us. No way. No way. They're out of context. These are instructions for when somebody's done a lot of shamatha, when they've done a lot of vipassana practice. Their mind is very stable, their mind is very, very wise. And what you're talking about isn't the past, like your whole history, or the future, everything we imagine is to come. It's about a mind that can stay undistracted with each thing as it arises and can let it go. So whatever there was 1 split second before, your mind isn't even holding on to it, following it. That's the past. And the future that you're not anticipating is where your meditation experience of this moment is going to go next. You're going to let it come, and you can't let it come until you've got rid of the anticipation of the next moment and the clinging to the past moment. You need to be prepared for that level of meditation because it is such a total letting go that you have all the Mahamudra preliminaries and shamatha and vipassana to do beforehand. So those words from the Indian Mahasiddhas and great masters are those 2 things. Hard to understand because they're very concise, and they're easy to misunderstand. They were given out as poetry. And what the Karmapa noticed, which is so true, is that in India, people just did it. There was no notebook saying what they did and when they did it. So what's astounding is that Buddhism was in India for about 1600 years before it was wiped out. We have almost no record at all. All over India, thousands of Buddhist monasteries. The only information we have is what travelers from other countries logged about the places, the masters they met, and then in those very precious years of overlap when Buddhism had gone to Tibet and Tibetan masters were going to India while Buddhism was still there, they did research into the people, the history, the monasteries. It's just amazing. So anyway, to tell us about Mahamudra, we have the Indian commentaries. Now the Tibetans thought very differently, very, very differently. They are structured, very structured. And so they have what are called in Tibetan sabche. Sabche is a text structure, and it tells you in this line or in this verse, this is what's going on. And then Tibetans, the great Tibetan masters, were excellent at writing commentaries. So they unpacked the meaning for us. They unpacked the meaning, and they showed us how, like with the Mahamudra prayer, we have 24 main teaching verses, 25 verses, 26 altogether. And so they're showing how this presentation of Mahamudra evolves in a very structured way. So what I've given you in the support document is the structure of the third Karmapa's Mahamudra prayer as seen, as understood by the VIIIth Tai Situpa, Tempanincheo, Chuki, Jumne. The juicy bits come after we've got through the first few verses. The stuff that we need to know and then need to go deeper and deeper into, they come a bit later. And they're really interesting. There are a lot of food for thought. And I hope you do sort of think about what's really going on here with each verse, rather than just listen and think, okay, Ken explained it, that was it. The whole point is I'm giving you food, but please chew it and digest it. Don't take it into your mouth and then spit it out on the ground, like a baby. You put the food in and it's all out. Nothing nourished. Please chew. Please digest. Please let it grow your muscles and your understanding and your peace, your inner peace. Now, I don't want to spend too long on this introduction, but traditionally in Tibet, when this prayer is presented, I have to speak about the qualities of the author, which was the third Jawan Karmapa. And of course, he was an extraordinary being. He was a Karmapa. So normally when we look at an author, we say, did it come from Buddha? If not, did it come from a bodhisattva? Check out the bodhisattva. Was this a 10th level bodhisattva or first level bodhisattva? Did it come, if it wasn't from Buddha or bodhisattva, did it come from a very, very wise person? And what were they really good at? What were they famous for? We look at the author. So now the author, the third Karmapa, was a Karmapa. The activity of all the Buddhas, and in all the line of the 17 Karmapas, one that stands out particularly. And especially for the Mahamudra practice, this Mahamudra prayer, very famous. But the third Karmapa and the 8th Karmapa really gave us so much wealth of material to work with in a different way. The 9th Karmapa as well. Some of them stand out. Some of them didn't live so long. But anyway, the third one stands out, and in particular, because he was early on. So I could spend a whole session about the third Karmapa, why it's important. Some Tibetan scholars say he was the first real tulku in Tibet. There was the first Karmapa, Dusum Jempa. He was reborn as Karmapakshi and was recognized as the reincarnation of the Karmapa. But it wasn't unknown in India or Tibet for somebody to come back once. To be recognized as, oh, this was so-and-so before. But to come back and take over the monasteries and the students and so on that were there before systematically, you can only really say that happens with the third one. And how the second one wrote a letter about how he would come back. And then he came back as predicted and took over. So he's important from being the first, the very first tulku of all of Tibet reincarnate found. He's important in Asian history because he was the guru of the Chinese emperor. At the time, it was a bit more complicated because China wasn't China as it is now. It was ruled by Mongolia. The Chinese emperors were Mongols, and Mongolia was very strong. But anyway, the third Karmapa enthroned that Chinese emperor. I've given you in the support document a brief version of his biography. If you want a fuller version, this is a very good book for the Karmapas, the 16 Karmapas by Karmatinlipa. Wonderful Lama, Karmatinlipa. He told me I was a very bad man, but that was a long time ago. I hope I've changed since. He was, true. It was, well, I don't want to tell too many stories, but it was very, very early on in my Dharma journey. And in my first 2 years with Akon Rinpoche, I disagreed with him. I always thought I was going back to India to find my real guru. It took me a while to realize he'd been sitting in front of me. So sometimes I argued, I got angry, I must admit. And Karmatinli was in Samiling at that time. And I met him once in a corridor, and our two ancient dogs were going by. The old ones had a very bad heart condition, so he was like this, trying to catch up with the female. And Karmatinlipa was looking at me with huge eyes, and he had big, strong lens glasses, so his eyes were about twice the size. And he just said, "You're a very bad man." Arguing with Akon Rinpoche, he said, "You're just like, you're no better than these dogs." So that was a very good teaching. But anyway, he wrote a great biography of the 16 Karmapas of Tibet. And so there you'll find a fuller version about how Karmapa was born. He was self-recognized because when he was quite young, he asked the other kids to set up a throne, and he found a black hat of some sort and he put it on. He said, "I'm Karmapa." And news of all of this spread, and the great Mahasiddha Ujjimpa, who was the holder of the Kagyu lineage at that time, found him, enthroned him. First part of his life, he got a very intense transmission of all the Kagyu teachings. When he was a teenager, he went off to a very famous Kadampa monastery to study the Bodhisattva path and the lineages that they held. After that, he went to study with the Nyingmapas. And we find at several points in his story that because he was Karmapa, because he was so special, sometimes sitting in meditation, everything will come to him, like the Kali Chakra teachings. He received some teachings, but then the Kali Chakra just came to his forehead chakra like this, and he understood like years and years and years and years worth of stuff, experientially, Kali Chakra teachings about the microcosmos that we are as a human being, and the macrocosmos around us. And then the Nyingmapa teachings, he started the what's called the Kagyu, what can you call it, essence drop Nyingmapa teachings. So this is within the Kagyu tradition. We have all the Guru Rinpoche transmissions, the special ones that he received from Guru Rinpoche directly. Tibetan medicine teachings and astrology, he set for Tibet. He made the astrological calendar, the Sufu tradition calendar that we still use. And then the teachings, the cutting through, which belong to a larger set of teachings from Padampa Sonje, Machik. He integrated those. An incredibly huge mind. And so he gives us this essence of Mahamudra in this prayer. And then to understand his prayer and its 20-odd verses, then we are using a commentary by the 8th Tai Situpa Chukijone. Now, he was the greatest of all the Tai Situpas. I mean, that's what Tai Situpa himself says. It's not for me to judge who was the best Tai Situpa, but the present Tai Situpa. And over Tibet, he was known as Situpanchen. And he was a great pandita. This means Panchen means great pandita. He went to India several times. He was a great master of Tibetan language, Sanskrit language. And you know, I know, because I'm a translator, when you translate, the way you feel the words in the original language can never be put into your own language. There's always something missing. Words have their feel, their weight, their flavor. And so Situpanchen, who'd been to India, he really could tune in 100% to the Indian Mahamudra texts. Wonderful, amazing mind. So he is telling us what the Karmapa means. He's unpacking the verses of the Karmapa's prayer. So we've kind of zoomed in. And then also what Tai Situpa gives us is the structure, the sapche for the prayers. So now we can start, and in the support document, you've got the prayer itself. Please read what I sent you about the third Karmapa, and if you can, I think you can download online a PDF of the Karmatindipa's book. And then I also sent you, because it's interesting, hope you can see this diagram, which shows the third Karmapa. Where is it? Underneath the line, Angjun Doji. And then on the left-hand column, you've got the various practices that were integrated over the generations down to the present Karmapa. Please look at those things. So now we come to the prayer. We got there at last. It took me, 3/4 of an hour? Nevertheless, we're getting there to the actual prayer. And we start with the title. Now, one thing the present Tai Situpa explained very much is that titles of Dharma texts are not just kind of made up, or let's have a nice title. He said the title should tell someone who knows just what's in the whole text. So we call it Mahamudra prayer. And in Tibetan, it's Ngetan Chachachempo Manam. It was written in Tibetan by the third Karmapa, but he was using powerful words from the Sanskrit. So if we put the title into Sanskrit, it would be Nittata Mahamudra Pranidhana. And those words are full of meaning. The first word, which we don't translate into English, although in the support document I sent out to about 1/3 of you because I revised it, I have put in the full title in English, as much as one can. The problem of translation. Sanskrit to Tibetan, Tibetan to English. And I'd like to unpack the title because it's so full of meaning. If you can bear with me. It's not a scholarly exercise. It's so that, as I said at the beginning, this is about you, me, your mind, my mind, the very nature of reality. So the first word in Tibetan, which comes up very much in our Tibetan Mahamudra texts, is Ngedern. Ngedern. Nittata. Nittata is a mixture of two Sanskrit words, nita and artha. So the middle R is long because they overlap. Nita, artha, nittata. The artha is terrible to translate because it has 6 meanings. And if you choose any one of them in English, you exclude the other 5. But in an English translation, you can't put 6 meanings. You have to pick something. So the artha in Tibetan is dern. It's part of dern. One of the meanings is meaning. It means meaning. And so let's do the other word that goes with it. We usually translate as definitive, definite, final, ultimate. So it's the ultimate meaning. You know, when things have meaning, are meaningful, what does it all mean? What's the meaning of life? This is the ngedern, the ultimate meaning. Sometimes nge is translated as certain. You've heard all the other versions of what's the meaning of life or what's the meaning of it all. This is it. No doubt about it. It's the certain or the definitive dern as meaning. But then dern also means point. What's the point? I'm sure in your life, like in my life, I've asked that question. What's the point? You sometimes sit down and wonder, what's it all? What's the point? Where's all this leading? Buddhism's so complicated. I feel sorry for newcomers. They come to temples, systems, lamas, all these different practices, and then people bobbing up and down, they're offering lights, they're doing all sorts of stuff. What's the point of all of that? But we've got the point in other things. Like, what's the point of if you're into nature or shamanism, it's about understanding the energies at work and being in harmony with them and using them for good. If you're a Christian, what's the point? Is you surrender to Jesus' love. I hesitate to speak for any of the other faiths because I might get it wrong. But in other faiths, it might be obedience to God. God made it all. It's all God's show. You just got to conform and not mess up because you're going to get the wrath of God or whatever. What's the point? What's all this about? Turn means the point. So the ultimate point is that. Then dern also is a word for focus. It's like our power to see has as its dern visible things, shapes, colors. Our power to hear has as its dern sounds that it can hear, that it can focus on, that are its field of activity. And so then our mind consciousness, as in terms of relative consciousness, has thoughts and memories and imagination. So out of all the places our mind can go, looking, hearing, thinking, imagining, fantasizing, what's the turn where we want it to be anchored? When we practice and train in shamatha, you put your mind on a candle flame or on your breath, you have a turn, you have a focus. What's the definitive? In the end of it all, what's the focus? And so like this, turn has quite a few meanings. And often it's translated ngedern as the definitive meaning, definitive truth. So I'll leave you to think about that. If you're just an intellectual, you can say, of course, what's true for you, you think that's the truth, but it's not true for somebody else. They've got their own idea. How can you say, I've got the definitive truth? Isn't that what all religions say? We got it, you didn't. Come and join us, you'll be happy, you'll be free, you'll be whatever. Isn't it just, aren't you just another religion saying you've sussed it all out and you've got the top message? It's not that. It's not that. But this is something we can only understand by freeing our mind through meditation, so that we become totally clear observers, not programmed by a religion, by ideas, by preset stories, but our mind wakes up. And once it wakes up, that's it. For instance, let's say you're in a dormitory and you've woken up and people are dreaming. Luckily for you, they're not just dreaming, but they're talking about their dreams. So one of them's going, horses, horses. Another person who's dreaming is going, snakes, snakes. Another person who's dreaming is going, marshmallows, marshmallows. And so they're each in their own world, the truth of which is marshmallows or horses or snakes. But you've woken up and you understand that when you're dreaming, that's what goes on. You can be in a world full of marshmallows, floating marshmallows on green clouds, or horses running so fast you're scared they're going to run towards you and trample you, or whatever it is. You understand this is what the sleeping mind can do. And this one's reality is that one, but this is what mind does. And the awake mind is just there, observing. So Buddha is called the awakened one. The word Buddha means woken up. So when we say nidan in Tibetan, or nitata, then we mean this is the definitive point, the definitive meaning, the ultimate truth of it all. And that is called, in the next word, nitata, Mahamudra, which is the name. So here mudra doesn't mean mudra in the terms of hand gestures or body shapes, postures. It has another meaning in Sanskrit, which is seal. Not not that kind of a seal, but the seal which is a stamp. And it's a silly image, but it's in my mind. In the pre-digital days, when you bought a camera, like you bought an Asahi Pentax, it would have just a little gold sticky label on it, which said certified. Now, anyone can stick a gold sticky label onto anything that says certified, but somehow when you looked at it, wow, that was a real Asahi Pentax camera. The label says so. So a seal, which tells you what something is, like a logo on a piece of clothing, or whatever. The seal, the stamp that you get on an official document, which means this is it. That kind of a seal. Maha means great. So the Mahamudra, the great seal, means there is not one reality, not one. Whether it's from the highest states of mind, divine states of mind, down to the most wretched paranoia, psychosis of hell, or whether it's on the steps of the spiritual path, the Buddhist path, or any other spiritual path, there is not one experience of mind which is not stamped with this nitata, ultimate meaning. It's like this one's dreaming horses. Yeah, but they're dreaming horses. Their mind's dreaming horses. This one's dreaming snakes. Yeah, that's what mind does. It can dream snakes or marshmallows. Everything that they're going through is stamped with the reality of this is dream. Dream. Like you go to the cinema, a horror film, documentary, whatever, all films. All films. In the old days, there's always the projector, the film going like this, something on the screen. Directors and producers made it with actors and actresses and so on. Whatever it was, That was the one nature of all the films that were all made and being projected just now. Our film was made in Karma, not in China, lifetimes ago, is being projected onto our screen right now. This one nature of Medan, the ultimate meaning, the ultimate point, is there in every single moment, in all of our lifetimes, from heaven to hell, human being to butterfly. That truth is there every moment. And our Mahamudra practice is to unveil that truth. So, Nitartha Mahamudra, and then Pratidana. Pranidana, not Pratidana, Pranidana. Pranidana we translate as prayer, Munlam in Tibetan, like in Kaju Munlam. That's another one that in its original meaning is very, very, very rich. And I think I saw in one dictionary 18, or was it 20 meanings. Now, Munlam, or that we translate as prayer, has got a couple of main meanings. One of them is of a treasure, something very valuable and precious. Another meaning is application, whereby you need to do something with a drive in order for it to happen, in order for it to become real. So that's translated, all of them, and there are many, many other meanings, as Mernlam. Mern means aspiration in Tibetan, wishes, and Lam means it's a path. So the Mern, the aspirations, become the treasures that we give rise to through our pure heart, pure thought. We sit down and we make a prayer. And then if we've got that endeavor, the effort, the application to do it mindfully, to do it powerfully, with the right motivation, then we have a path of prayer, Mern Lam, path of prayer. So let's leave that there. There's a lot in the title, but anyway, that's the main title. Medan Chachachimpo Mern Lam. Excuse me. Then if you look at the structure in your document, we start out simple. First one you'll see is called a preparation for the aspiration prayer. So like many things, you have a beginning, then the actual thing, and then a conclusion. So the beginning is preparing ourselves, and here the third Karmapa is mainly speaking for himself, but on our behalf. And he says, Namo Guru. Gurus, Yidams, deities of the mandalas, all the victors and your offspring in the 10 directions and the 3 times. Please think of me with your compassionate love and grant your blessing that my Mernlam, my wishing prayers, or in particular this wishing prayer, comes true. So this is like the introduction, the setting up of the prayer. Nearly always in the explanations it says when the author does this, it's to help themselves achieve total humility. So it says the third Karmapa is not saying, hey guys, look, I've got some brilliant ideas and I want to share them with you. And this is all it's Mahamudra, I got it all sorted like this. First thing they do is to pay homage to their own teachers. It shows us they are passing on something that they received. And ideally, as transparently as possible, as perfect as possible. It starts with Namo Guru. There's a whole story behind this. one, what can we call him? Tough, maybe, Tibetan king wasn't happy with the way that people were putting in their translations and their prayers homages. It was usually to their favorite practice, their favorite yidam. And he said, no more of that. Anyone who writes a prayer from now on, these are the rules. If you don't follow the rules, you're in prison, right? This is serious. If you write a prayer, first of all, you have to be worthy to write a prayer. So that's a whole other story. But if they were considered worthy, you've got to start it in one of these ways. So when it's mainly the text for a prayer, teaching about the sutra level of Buddhism, then we start with Namo Buddha, with homage to the Buddha. And then if it's about Abhidharma, we start with a homage to Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. Here we've got not homage to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, homage to the Buddha, homage to Manjushri. We've got Namo Guru. Namo means I praise or homage to Guru, my Guru. This is all about what comes to us from our Guru. More precisely, what our Guru's presence in our life awakens from within us. So the whole of Mahamudra depends on the pure line of transmission, of what we call samaya, pure connection with our Gurus. Many of you have Tai Situpa or Trungpa Rinpoche, Jaltap Rinpoche, Karmapa as your Guru. And so there, the third Karmapa had many wonderful gurus from which he received those different lineages, Kalachakra, Nyingmapa teachings and so on. But his own guru who introduced him to the Kagyu teachings was Ujjimpa. He's the one in the refuge tree who doesn't have a throne, he's on a lotus. He was like an emanation of Guru Rinpoche. So he's paying homage to his guru and all of the Kagyu gurus before. And then, as you can see, to this list of presences, saying, please think of me with your compassionate love and grant me your blessing that my wishing prayers come true. So when we do the prayer, of course, we're saying it for ourselves. We're paying homage to our own guru. And then we have this list, which in his commentary, the Tai Situpa unpacks in little detail. So it says, gurus, yidams, deities of the mandalas. So the gurus, guru means teacher in Indian languages. Simple as that. In classrooms, kids call their teacher guru. Just it means teacher, someone who teaches. It's become very special in Vajrayana Buddhism. And really, the meaning here, and in the Tibetan, it's not guru, that's Sanskrit, it's lama. So in the early years of Tibetan Buddhism, the word lama was used for very few people indeed, and it's those who are able to pass on the lineage to you. Very, very sacred word, lama. Over the years, it's devalued, unless you know the original meaning. Someone who's simply old and who's been around a long time, an old monk, an old nun, an old monk mainly, who studied a bit, who practiced quite a bit, they get called lama. In the West, anyone who did a 3-year retreat, 4-year retreat, in some traditions, got the title lama. But of course, none of those people can transmit the lineage to you purely as received from Mapa Naropa, Tilopa, Milarepa? Of course not. So the original meaning of the word Lama was somebody who had the mastery and the transmission of Mahamudra and who could pass it on. So then to our own Mahamudra gurus who can pass it on, and then more generally to all the gurus of the other lineages, because in the end, if everything goes right, all of their practices lead to the one changeless Buddha mind. Always was, is now, always will be, beyond time and space. It is what it is. You can call it what the hell you want. You can call it Frederic if you want, or Mary, or anything. It is. It is. This is why it's called Nidan, Nidata. It's what in the end is the definitive truth. So all the gurus, authentic gurus of authentic lineages that lead us to that one changeless nature of mind, we are praying to them. And then yidams, whereas the gurus are beings, yidams are practices. They are forms. Yi means mind. Dam means bond, connection. So they are what connect our mind primarily with our guru's realization, with our guru's being, presence. But the yidam is a practice. So we just finished Chinrezig as a yidam, which is a means the teacher can give you. And you do the Chinrezig practice, and your mind becomes joined with the compassion and the wisdom and the void nature of your guru's mind, the lineage mind. And each yidam has its own special power, understanding that can be transmitted through it. So when we look at that, the 6 yogas, the very deep practices, they are transmitted through special yidams. And then more generally, we saw Chinrezig helps us understand the compassion of all the Buddhas. And then Tara, Mahakala, help us to connect with. So the yi, our mind is dham, is bonded to, is connected with the qualities of Buddha mind through practices. So the yidams of the Kajupa, those of you doing prostrations and refuge know the main yidams. And then the yidams in themselves are not often sole characters. They have other enlightened beings in their entourage. So these are called the deities of the mandalas. For instance, if we do Amitabha practice for the dead, there is Amitabha, and then there's Chinrezig and Vajrapani, one on either side. This goes very, very deep. And it's connected with our inner body, our inner energy channels, one main one, 2 secondary ones, and all that kind of thing. The deities of the mandalas have an outer meaning, have an outer blessing and presence in the universe, but they have an inner meaning in the microcosm, which is ourself, which was, of course, the 3rd Karmapa's deep speciality. And then all of the Victor, so this is one of the names for the Buddhas. He wasn't called Victor like the English name, Vic Siddhartha, Vic Gautama or something like that. He was victorious over his mind. That's what we're aiming to do. This habitual samsaric mind, with all of its desire and passion and aggression and hostility and jealousy and stupidity and all those things, to gain a non-return victory and then a total victory, so that not one bit of any of the darkness or the confusion is left. That is the victor. Buddha, that's what Buddha did. And then the bodhisattvas, so it says, and your offspring. So this is another topic that can take a whole teaching once you get into it, and in Abhidharma. So it goes a bit like this. Buddha's offspring. Okay, there are several. First of all, the Buddha, Shakyamuni, actually had a son, who became a very great arhat, Rahula. But we're not talking about that so much, but we have to include it if we're being technical. But the main thing is the bodhisattvas, who are the heirs to the Buddha's royal kingdom of mind. They are the princes, the heirs apparent, crown princes. But also, not just the bodhisattvas, the Pratyeka Buddhas, which are a very special form of Shravaka, and the Shravakas themselves, they all inherit pure transmission from the Buddha, and they achieve, whichever degree they achieve, the purity and liberation, release, happiness. So we're really saying Buddhas, bodhisattvas, Pratyeka Buddhas, Shravakas, all of the Buddhists who found definitive release. Where? In the 10 directions and the 3 times. So that means everywhere and at all times. The 10 directions, technically, north, south, east, west, northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest, zenith up top, and nadir down the bottom. But it doesn't mean that. Because what about the Buddhas in between? What about the north-northeast Buddhas? If we left them out, it means everywhere. It's a way of saying everywhere. Everywhere. In all the vast, unimaginable worlds that are possible for a mind to be in, to be reborn in. Wherever there are Buddhas, and then just now, and in the past, and in the future. So I have to finish very soon because of the time. I thought I might do the first 3 verses today, so not doing so well. But anyway, the 3 times, there are 3 definitions of time. The first one is linear time, where 3 times means the past, all gone, up to this present moment. Future means what didn't happen yet, what's going to happen. And present is this moment, which is, of course, shifting all the time to become the past. That's linear time. Second kind of time is karmic time. There you've got overlap. Just now, everything you are, everything that I'm experiencing, you're experiencing, is the result of many past karmas that have ripened in this life. Why are you with your children? Why did you have those parents? Why did you get this sort of brain that made you end up a farmer? Why were you born in that country? So we've got all sorts of karmas. Some of them last a few minutes, some of them last a few years, some of them last a whole lifetimes. Many, many overlapping karmas. They had their causes in the past, what we call the past in linear time. But the reality that was made in the past, in this kind of understanding of time, is a continuum. Once you've sown the seed of karma, that's it. Once you've made the cause, the result's bound to happen. So even though in the meantime we have kind of quiet time, as far as we're concerned, because we're not experiencing any results from our karma 2 lives ago, that's dormant in our stream of consciousness, and when the triggers come to awaken it, it will pop up. That becomes fascinating how that works. So the present is where the causes have already been created and the results are manifesting just now. Thousands of causes making the just now as complex as it is. Our interrelations with other people, with our own body, health, everything. That's the present. So we're looking at all these ongoing strands of karma. It's the present. Some of that present lasts all of this life. This body is one of the strands from the moment of conception until death. The past is where the causes have been made and all the results have been played out, story over. We see when the Buddha talks about his past lives, sometimes he says, because of that, in such and such a lifetime, there was this, all over. The future, and this comes with a health warning on the packet, we didn't make the causes yet, but maybe tomorrow you're going to start making them. So the future is when neither the causes nor the results have happened yet. But of course, in this life, we have a lot of power to make karma. So the future will be whatever we get up to next. But it didn't start yet. So that's karmic time. So much to be learned from that and thinking about it. Then the third one is timeless time. So when you become Buddha, or even before that, when you stably have mastery of the nature of mind, then you are somewhat in timeless time. Only Buddha is totally in timeless time and therefore aware of everything that ever happened and will happen in time and space. But we can start getting there, mainly through shamatha practice and devotion and faith. It will start with prescience of things that are going to happen in a few minutes or what's going to happen in the near future, memories of past lives, a little bit coming back, and it will get clearer and clearer. So we study that sometimes in Abhidharma. But timeless time is the pure nature of mind, which is beyond all manifestation, that we experience because we're plunged right into it as past and present and future. So Karmapa's praying, and now we can understand it a bit better. Gurus, yidams, all the deities of their mandalas, and then all of the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, wherever they are in the 10 directions, wherever they are in time and space, please help me, think of me with your great compassion. And please grant your blessing through the power of interdependence, auspicious connection, that these prayers I'm about to make in the following verses come true, just as they're wished. So thank you. We'll leave it there for today for the formal teaching. We have a little bit of time afterwards for comments and discussion and questions. So let's now dedicate. Sonom diye tomche zikpane, topne nye pedranam pamchene, je gana chipala trukpaye, sipe sole trowa trowarasho, janchub semcho rimpoche, ma jepanam jechochi, jepan nyampa me padam, kongme kongdo palwarasho, gewa diye nyotuda, chaja champo rupjone, Rowa chikjang malupa, dehi sala ka parasho.